The small-town police station buzzed with its usual monotony. Officer Jake Peterson leaned back at his desk, scanning a report while the faint hum of conversations and the clatter of a coffee machine filled the air. It was an ordinary day in Millbrook, quiet and uneventful until the door creaked open. At first, no one noticed. People often wandered in with minor grievances or lost keys, but this was different. A scruffy, mud-covered golden retriever burst through the door, panting heavily, her wide eyes scanning the room. Clamped gently in her jaws was a tiny, squirming puppy. Jake froze mid-sip of his coffee. "What in the world?" he muttered, placing his mug down. The dog trotted to the middle of the room, carefully placed the puppy on the floor, and turned to dash back out the door. The puppy let out a faint, pitiful whimper. Confused murmurs rippled through the room as officers stopped in their tracks, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. Jake knelt by the trembling pup, its fragile body barely larger than his hand. "Hey, little one," he whispered. "Where's your mom going?" Before he could process, the retriever burst back inside carrying a second puppy. Her movements were frantic, her ribs visible beneath her muddy coat, and her legs wobbled as exhaustion threatened to overtake her. She placed the second puppy beside the first and bolted out again. "Something's wrong," Jake said, his brow furrowed. The station fell silent, all eyes on the golden retriever's desperate actions. When the dog returned moments later with a third puppy, her frailty was undeniable. Her paws trembled, her breathing ragged. Jake gently scooped up the first two puppies, holding them close. "Someone grab a blanket," he called out, his voice sharp with urgency. The officers sprang into action, clearing a space on a nearby table. A colleague rushed over with a thick blanket, laying it out as Jake placed the pups down. Their tiny bodies shivered, eyes barely open, as they nestled into the warmth. The retriever returned once more, this time collapsing onto the floor. Jake knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her muddy fur. "You did good, girl," he said softly. "We've got them now." But the retriever wasn't done. She lifted her head, her eyes pleading as she let out a low, desperate whine. Jake's heart sank. "She's trying to tell us something," he murmured. Grabbing his jacket, Jake turned to his partner. "Let's follow her. There might be more out there." The retriever, as if understanding, struggled to her feet. She led them out into the rain, her steps faltering, but her determination unyielding. The officers followed, their flashlights cutting through the dim light of the dreary morning. When they reached the edge of a wooded area near an abandoned shed, the dog stopped, barking weakly. Inside, they found a damp, makeshift den, her attempt to shield her puppies from the elements. It was empty now, save for remnants of torn fabric and a faint scent of danger. "She brought them all to safety," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. The officers looked at the brave retriever with newfound respect. Back at the station, the golden retriever and her puppies were given warmth, food, and care. As the puppies nestled against her, their soft whimpers turned into peaceful sighs. Jake looked at the courageous mother and her little ones, a swell of admiration in his chest. That day, the station wasn't just a place for law and order, it became a sanctuary for hope and survival, all thanks to the courage of one golden retriever. The steady hum of the police station was replaced by a hushed stillness as Officer Jake Peterson knelt beside the exhausted golden retriever. Her matted fur told a story of struggle, and her heaving sides betrayed how much strength it had taken to get here. Beside her, 4 tiny puppies squirmed on a soft blanket, their faint whimpers tugging at everyone's heartstrings. Linda, another officer, crouched beside Jake, her face filled with concern. "Where did she come from?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake ran a hand gently over the dog's head, his touch reassuring. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tight with emotion. "But whatever she's been through, she brought her pups here for a reason." The golden retriever lifted her head weakly, her tired eyes locking with Jake's. There was something there he couldn't quite describe: gratitude, desperation, maybe even hope. Whatever it was, it stirred something deep inside him. The usually bustling station had fallen silent. Officers stood in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of awe and worry. The sight of the mother dog and her pups had cast a spell over the room, leaving everyone acutely aware of the gravity of the moment. "Let's get her some water," Jake said, his voice steady but urgent. Linda hurried to grab a bowl, filling it as Jake placed it gently near the dog. "Here you go, girl," he murmured softly. "You've done enough. Rest now." The dog's tongue flicked out, lapping weakly at the water. Her eyes darted to her puppies, who were snuggling close, their tiny cries breaking the silence. Jake's throat tightened. This wasn't just a stray looking for help. This was a mother who had fought against impossible odds to protect her family. "We need a vet," Jake said firmly, turning to Linda. "She's exhausted, and those pups need care." Linda nodded, already pulling out her phone. "On it," she replied, stepping away to make the call. Jake stayed beside the golden retriever, running his hand gently over her muddy fur. He noticed the scratches on her legs and the burrs tangled in her coat, signs of a journey fraught with danger. "What happened out there?" he murmured. "Where did you come from?" The dog didn't answer, of course, but the weight of her journey was written all over her. Jake's chest tightened as he glanced down at the puppies, their tiny forms trembling with vulnerability. Whatever had driven this brave mother to their station, Jake knew one thing for sure: she had come here for a reason. Now, it was their turn to protect her. The golden retriever lay on the blanket, her breathing uneven but steadier than before. Her tired eyes stayed fixed on Jake Peterson, as though silently pleading for him to understand. Exhaustion clouded her gaze, but there was also an unmistakable glimmer of trust, an unspoken acknowledgement that she had made the right choice in coming here. Meanwhile, the police station buzzed with quiet speculation. Officers exchanged theories, each more dramatic than the last. "Maybe she escaped from a bad owner," one officer murmured. "Or she's a stray who just got lucky," another suggested. Linda, returning from her phone call, interrupted their musings. "The vet's on the way. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Her voice carried relief, but her brows furrowed as she glanced at the mother dog. Still, why here? Why a police station? Jake nodded, his thoughts mirroring hers. There were so many other places the dog could have gone: homes, shelters, even the park. Why had she chosen this station? He crouched down, running a hand gently over her matted fur. "Why here, girl?" he murmured. Suddenly, the dog's head shot up. She let out a low, guttural whine, her ears perking sharply toward the door. Her body tensed, and her breathing quickened. "What is it, girl?" Jake asked, his tone calm but alert. She tried to stand, her shaky legs wobbling beneath her. Jake placed a steadying hand on her back. "Easy now. You're safe." But she wouldn't settle. Her gaze stayed locked on the entrance, and an eerie unease settled over the room. "You think someone's out there?" Linda asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Jake's jaw tightened. "I don't know, but something spooked her." Rising, his hand instinctively found the holster at his side. He strode to the door and pushed it open, stepping into the crisp air. The street outside was quiet, the familiar hum of small-town life carrying on. But as Jake scanned the surroundings, his eyes landed on something that didn't belong: a black truck parked near the edge of the woods. Its engine idled softly, and its tinted windows obscured the driver. Jake's gut churned. This wasn't just coincidence. The dog's desperation, the scratches on her legs, and her frantic urgency, it all pointed to something more sinister. He turned and re-entered the station, his mind racing. "There's a truck parked by the woods," he said to Linda, his voice low and steady. "Doesn't look familiar. I think she might have been running from something or someone." Linda's eyes widened. "You think she was being chased?" Jake nodded grimly. "It's possible. And if that's the case, whoever was after her might still be out there." The golden retriever, though lying still, kept her eyes darting toward the door, her unease palpable. Jake clenched his fists. She hadn't just come here for help. She'd come here to escape. And now, it was up to Jake to protect her and her pups and uncover the truth before it was too late. The golden retriever's eyes remained fixed on the door, her body tense and alert despite her exhaustion. Her puppies, blissfully unaware of the tension, huddled together, letting out soft whimpers as they sought warmth. Jake Peterson couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The image of the black truck parked near the woods lingered in his mind. This dog hadn't stumbled into the station by chance. She'd been running, possibly from someone. Linda approached him, her voice low. I checked with dispatch. No reports of a missing dog matching her description. But get this, a call came in earlier about suspicious activity near the woods. Someone saw a man loading something into the back of a truck. Jake's jaw tightened. Black truck? Linda nodded. Sounds like it. But the caller didn't stay on the line, no details. Jake glanced at the dog again. Her fur was matted with dirt, her ribs faintly visible beneath her golden coat. She wasn't just a stray. Someone had neglected her, or worse. Whatever had happened, she'd fought to protect her puppies and bring them somewhere safe. The station door creaked open, and Dr. Patel, the town's trusted veterinarian, stepped inside with her medical kit. Her warm, calm presence immediately eased some of the tension in the room. I hear you've got some special patients for me, she said, her eyes softening as they landed on the dog and her pups. Jake led her over. She brought them here herself. We've done what we could, but they're in rough shape. Dr. Patel knelt beside the dog, her touch gentle as she examined the mother and her pups. She's dehydrated and exhausted, but no major injuries. The puppies are malnourished but stable. She's been doing her best to keep them alive. As Dr. Patel worked, the dog seemed to relax slightly, her eyes softening as if she knew she was finally in good hands. The puppies snuggled closer to their mother, tiny whimpers fading into contented sighs. Jake felt a smile tug at his lips. You're a fighter, aren't you, girl? Dr. Patel stood, her expression serious. She's resilient, but whatever she went through, it's taken a toll. Before Jake could respond, the dog let out a low growl, her body tensing again. Her ears perked, and her gaze fixed sharply on the door. Her teeth bared slightly, a clear warning. The officers froze, their attention snapping back to the entrance. Jake turned to Linda. Keep an eye on her. I'm gonna check that truck. Linda grabbed his arm, concern etched on her face. Jake, be careful. If someone's after her, they might not back down easily. Jake nodded, his jaw set with determination. If they're after her, they'll have to go through me first. With a deep breath, he stepped outside, Shadow by his side, ready to uncover the truth behind the golden retriever's desperate plea for safety. Jake Peterson stepped outside, his heart pounding as he moved toward the edge of the woods where the black truck sat like a shadow. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and every instinct screamed at him to stay alert. The truck's engine was no longer running, but its presence radiated menace. Jake's hand rested on his holster as he approached, his eyes scanning every detail. Scratches marred the side of the truck, deep and jagged, as though something or someone had fought to escape. The truck bed held ropes, a dirty blanket, and faint smears of what looked like dried blood. Jake's chest tightened. This wasn't random. Someone had been involved in something cruel, and this dog and her puppies were at the heart of it. Following a trail of footprints leading from the truck into the woods, Jake quickly radioed Linda. "Call it in," he said, his voice clipped. "We've got a situation. Backup needs to move fast." Returning to the station, he found the golden retriever more tense than ever. Her low growls filled the room, her body rigid as she stared at the door. Jake crouched in front of her, speaking softly. "It's okay, girl. We're gonna keep you safe." But as he looked into her eyes, he realized her growls weren't just a warning, they were a plea. Someone was coming, and they weren't here to help. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Linda met Jake at the door, her face tight with worry. "What did you find?" she asked. "The truck's tied to this," Jake replied, keeping his voice low. "There are ropes in the back, and blood. Whoever owns it isn't here by coincidence." Linda's face darkened. "Dispatch is sending backup, but it could take a while." Jake glanced at the dog, her gaze darting to the windows. "We might not have that time," he said. "The footprints lead into the woods. They could be watching us." As if on cue, the dog barked sharply, her body rigid. A low growl rumbled in her chest, drawing uneasy glances from the officers. Dr. Patel, still crouched beside the puppies, looked up. "If someone's after her, they're not going to stop. We need to move now." Jake nodded. "Linda, get the station's SUV. We'll move her to the vet's clinic. It's closer and more secure." Linda hesitated, her eyes flicking to the windows. What if they're already watching us? Jake's jaw tightened. Then we don't have a choice. If we wait, it could be too late. As Linda moved to ready the SUV, Jake knelt by the dog once more, his voice steady. We'll keep you safe. I promise. Shadow barked again, her loyalty unwavering, as if she understood Jake's words. Together, they prepared for the next move, determined to face whatever danger awaited. Jake Peterson's heart raced as the situation escalated outside the station. The golden retriever barked sharply from inside, her frantic cries blending with the growing tension in the air. Jake tightened his grip on his holster, his eyes fixed on the two men before him. The first man, tall and rough-looking with a baseball cap pulled low, smirked coldly. His words lingered in Jake's mind. You really think you can stop us? Jake didn't flinch. His voice was calm but firm. I don't think I know. Now back off before this gets worse for you. Behind him, Linda emerged from the station. The SUV is ready, she called, urgency sharpening her tone. Jake gave a quick nod, not breaking his focus on the men. Good, he replied. Get the dog and the pups loaded. Linda hesitated for a split second, her eyes flickering to the men, before turning and hurrying back inside. Inside the station, Dr. Patel was already moving quickly, wrapping the tiny puppies in a soft blanket while guiding the golden retriever to her feet. The dog, though weak, seemed to understand the urgency. Her trembling legs carried her forward, her gaze never leaving the door as if she could sense the danger. Outside, the second man, holding the crowbar, shifted uneasily. Jake noticed the subtle glance he exchanged with the man in the baseball cap. They were sizing him up, trying to gauge whether he'd actually draw his weapon. I'm not going to warn you again, Jake said, his voice steady. Turn around and leave. Now. The man with the crowbar took half a step forward, testing Jake's resolve. But before he could move any further, a deep growl rumbled from behind Jake. Shadow, the golden retriever, had appeared at the station door. Though frail and battered, she stood tall, her teeth bared and her growl low and menacing. Her eyes locked on the two men with a fiery intensity that made even Jake pause for a moment. She's got more fight left than you'd think, Jake said, a hint of admiration in his voice. And so do I. The men hesitated, the growl and Jake's unwavering stance seeming to unsettle them. Then, slowly, the man with the crowbar lowered his weapon, glancing at his companion. The first man's grin faded, replaced by a scowl. Without a word, they backed away toward the truck. That's what I thought, Jake muttered, watching as they climbed into the vehicle. The engine roared to life, and the truck sped off down the road. Jake exhaled deeply, turning back toward the station. Shadow stood at the door, her body trembling, but her eyes steady. Jake knelt beside her, gently stroking her matted fur. You're safe now, girl, he said softly. Inside, the puppies were secured in the SUV, and Linda gave him a thumbs up. Jake scooped up Shadow, her body light in his arms, and carried her to the waiting vehicle. As the SUV pulled away, Jake glanced back at the empty road. He didn't know what the men's motives were, but one thing was clear: they weren't done yet. But neither was he. Shadow and her pups were safe for now, and he would do whatever it took to keep it that way. Jake Peterson's heart pounded as he watched the golden retriever and her puppies being carefully loaded into the SUV. He exchanged a quick nod with Linda, his voice sharp and determined. Get them out of here. Don't stop for anything. Linda gripped the steering wheel tightly as she pulled onto the quiet country road, glancing at the rearview mirror every few seconds. In the back seat, Dr. Patel sat beside the golden retriever, who rested her weary head in the vet's lap. The puppies, bundled together in a soft blanket, whimpered faintly but seemed comforted by their mother's presence. It's okay, girl, Dr. Patel whispered, gently stroking the dog's matted fur. You're safe now. The retriever let out a soft sigh, her eyes fluttering shut as exhaustion finally claimed her. Dr. Patel could feel the tension easing from the dog's body, a stark contrast to the terror that had brought her to the station. For the first time in what must have been days, she was beginning to feel safe. Back at the station, Jake stood at the entrance, his eyes fixed on the retreating taillights of the SUV. As they disappeared into the distance, a gnawing unease remained in his chest. This wasn't over. Those men hadn't given up, they were regrouping, and Jake knew it. "Carl," Jake called to the officer standing by the door, "keep an eye on the perimeter. Those guys might come back." Carl nodded, his expression grim as he moved to take up position near the station's entrance. Jake, however, couldn't just stand idle. His instincts screamed that this was bigger than anyone realized. He picked up his radio and called dispatch. "I need backup to search the woods near the station. There's evidence of illegal activity tied to that truck." "Understood," came the response. "Units are en route." Jake clipped the radio back to his belt and began pacing, the weight of the situation pressing on him. The truck, the ropes, the traces of blood, it all painted a picture he couldn't ignore. These men weren't simply neglectful pet owners. They were hiding something sinister. Meanwhile, in the SUV, Linda's knuckles whitened as she gripped the wheel. "Do you think they'll follow us?" she asked, her voice tight. Dr. Patel glanced at her, hesitating before shaking her head. "I don't know. But if they're as determined as Jake thinks, we need to stay on guard." The golden retriever stirred slightly at her words, letting out a soft whimper. It was as if she understood the danger wasn't entirely behind them. But for now, she and her pups were moving toward safety, and Jake would make sure it stayed that way. Linda gripped the steering wheel with a mix of fear and determination as the black truck loomed closer in the rearview mirror. The impact from the earlier collision had sent her car swerving, but she managed to steady it just in time. Beside her, the golden retriever growled low and steady, positioning herself protectively in front of the crate where her puppies whimpered softly. "Dr. Patel, hold on tight," Linda shouted, her voice edged with urgency. In the back seat, Dr. Patel clutched the crate with white-knuckled hands, her gaze darting between the pups and the menacing truck behind them. "They're relentless," she muttered, her voice tight with fear. "What do they want with her?" Linda didn't answer. Her focus was locked on the dirt path ahead as the car bounced over potholes and loose gravel. The road narrowed, flanked by dense woods on either side, offering little room to maneuver. The black truck surged forward again, its driver intent on forcing them off the road. "They're trying to box us in," Dr. Patel said, panic creeping into her voice. "Not happening," Linda shot back, her grip on the wheel tightening. She veered sharply to the right, steering toward a break in the woods that opened into a field. The sudden move caught the truck off guard, causing it to swerve as the driver tried to follow. The field stretched wide and uneven, the terrain a mix of tall grass and scattered rocks. Linda pushed the car harder, the tires kicking up dirt as they sped forward. The golden retriever let out a sharp bark, her gaze never leaving the truck that now trailed them with relentless determination. In the rearview mirror, Linda saw the truck gaining again. "They're not backing off," she muttered through gritted teeth. The driver leaned out of his window, shouting threats that were lost in the roar of engines. Suddenly, an idea sparked in Linda's mind. Ahead, she spotted a narrow trail that veered into a wooded area. If she could lead the truck into the trees, its larger size might work against it. "Hold on," she called out as she turned sharply, the car jerking onto the trail. Branches scraped against the sides of the car as they sped through the dense forest. The truck followed, but the uneven terrain began to take its toll. Linda could hear the loud crunch of branches and the scrape of metal as the truck struggled to keep up. "They're slowing down," Dr. Patel said, hope flickering in her voice. Linda pressed on, weaving through the trees with precision. Behind them, the truck suddenly hit a large tree root, jolting violently before coming to a halt. The sound of grinding metal and the driver's frustrated shouts filled the air. "They're stuck," Dr. Patel exclaimed. Linda didn't slow down until they burst out of the forest onto a paved road. Breathing hard, she glanced at the golden retriever, whose tense body finally began to relax. "We did it, girl," Linda whispered. The golden retriever let out a soft whimper, her head resting on the crate as if understanding the danger had passed, at least for now. As they sped toward the vet clinic, Linda couldn't shake the lingering dread. Whoever those men were, they weren't just after a dog, they were after something much darker. But for now, the retriever and her puppies were safe. And that was all that mattered. The story of Hope and her puppies carries a powerful message for our daily lives. Resilience, compassion, and standing up for what's right can make a profound difference, even in the face of adversity. In the real world, we often encounter situations where we witness neglect, injustice, or challenges that seem insurmountable. Hope's journey reminds us that even in her weakest moments, she summoned the courage to fight for her family, seeking help and trusting in the kindness of strangers. Her bravery led to her rescue, a new chance at life and justice for those who wronged her. This story serves as a reminder to act with compassion and vigilance. Like Jake and the officers, we can play a vital role in recognizing when someone or something is in need and taking steps to provide support. Whether it's reporting animal cruelty, helping a struggling neighbor, or advocating for a cause, our willingness to get involved can change lives. In our daily lives, we should strive to pay attention, stay alert to signs of distress or injustice around you, much like Jake noticed the golden retriever's urgency. Act with empathy, approach challenges with understanding and compassion, even when solutions aren't immediately clear. Be courageous, standing up for others, especially the vulnerable, often requires bravery, as demonstrated by Jake's unwavering commitment to protect Hope. Foster community, rallying others to help, like the town coming together for Hope, shows the strength of unity in overcoming challenges. Hope's story teaches us that small acts of kindness, when multiplied, can lead to transformative outcomes. Let it inspire you to be vigilant, kind, and courageous in your everyday actions, knowing that your choices have the power to create a ripple effect of positive change. If you enjoyed today's story, give it a rating from 1 to 10. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reactions, and ideas for future stories. Your feedback helps us make the channel even better. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch new videos every day. Have an awesome day.